Good evening, friends, and welcome to Fund Manager Fridays with 5paisa.com. We're very happy to see you here today, and I'm Deepika Asthana, your host for the evening. अब इक्विटी मार्केट्स के बारे में तो हम सब काफी जानकारी रखते हैं, लेकिन जैसे एक अच्छी क्रिकेट टीम बनाने के लिए वी नीड डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ प्लेयर्स, वैसे ही एक अच्छा और रोबस्ट पोर्टफोलियो बनाने के लिए वी नीड डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ इन्वेस्टमेंट्स। इक्विटीज तो जैसे मैंने कहा हम सब लोग जानते ही हैं। डेट के बारे में भी हम लोग काफी वाकिफ हैं, बट देयर आर मेनी अदर थिंग्स अबाउट डेट इन्वेस्टमेंट्स दैट वी probably don't understand. And in today's session, while we will be talking about debt investments, but we will specifically be discussing passive debt investing, which is gaining a lot of prominence in India now and could be a very interesting addition to your portfolios. So, to discuss this and to walk you through debt passive investing, we have today with us Mr. Niranjan Avasthi, Head of Product and Marketing at Edelweiss AMC. Good evening, Niranjan, and welcome.
Good evening, and thanks for having me, Deepika. Nice to be here.
Pleasure, pleasure. So, actually, Niranjan, like I just mentioned, na, ki, as an investor, we are very blinkered in our approach कि अच्छा ग्रोथ चाहिए तो इक्विटी में डालो और स्टेबिलिटी चाहिए तो डेट में डालो, बट देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ बीच का रास्ता, राइट? बीच में बहुत कुछ हो सकता है विद इन द स्पेक्ट्रम ऑफ रिस्क एंड रिटर्न, एंड यू हैव बीन, आई नो फॉर अ फैक्ट, टॉकिंग अ लॉट अबाउट डेट इन्वेस्टिंग and passive investing in debts. So I think we can maybe first start our session with understanding what exactly is a passive investing.
Sure. See, passive investing is very simple. For investor, there are two choices today, right? One is to go and search for the right fund, then track that fund, review that fund on and off, and see whether it's doing well, it's beating the benchmark. That fund in turn is basically managed by a professional fund manager who takes active calls in the portfolio. What could do
Mhm,
well, what could go wrong, ignore what could go wrong. And that's the entire process of where we call it actively manage, right? At
right.
the fund manager level also, and even at the investor level, you need to be
Mhm,
actively reviewing those funds, and that's where it is
correct.
usually known as active investing. On the
Mhm,
passive side, it is very
mhm,
simple. There's no fund manager. On passive side, there are certain rules based on the indices are made. A
mhm,
particular fund, whether it is equity or debt passive, just mirrors that index, and
ठीक है.
investors can just choose the right index.
Mhm,
Once he chooses the right index, the right fund to follow that index, he just invests in it and just sit
mhm,
back. You don't need to review because there's no underperformance or outperformance over the index when you invest
mhm,
in an index fund or a ETF. And
mhm,
that's where it is called passive. You can just invest and passively wait for your money to grow, whether it is in equity or if it is in debt, to give you stable income over the years. So
mhm.
in simple terms, passive is basically a very simple form of investing. A lot of
Okay.
people call it a different name, but for me it is very, very simple investing for investors
Mhm,
who don't have wherewithal to review, select the right fund. Just go
mhm.
out and start with passive funds, whether it is equity or debt.
Perfect. So, Niranjan, two things actually that come to my mind when you just describe passive. एक तो it seems like कि if you are just investing in a fund which is replicating the underlying index, definitely, and I think you must have heard this before, the associated cost will be less. And I know
Hmm.
through our previous conversations that you like to also insist कि सिर्फ cost नहीं है और भी बहुत कुछ है which work
Absolutely.
for passive.
Absolutely.
So, first, can we discuss like generally कि क्या ये benefits हैं other than the upfront cost benefit?
Right. See, passive investing, and a lot of people underscores the other benefits which passive funds can give in. And
Mhm,
I'm not talking from equity or debt perspective.
mhm.
Of course, cost is important, and when we talk about debt passive, the cost is all the more important
Sure.
because the
Okay.
percentage, even 1% of your 6% return, it's
Mhm.
almost 20% of your total return. So costs are
Correct.
important, but we
Mhm,
should not just be sticking only to cost. See, passive
correct.
investing, as I initially mentioned, is a very, very simple form of investing.
Sure.
In a world where there are a lot of choices, there is a choice paradox. uh, I've seen a lot of people not getting started just because of so many choices, and we
Not
need
me.
to,
Mm-hmm.
drop down to one fund or review them. They just postpone their investments.
Mm-hmm.
So, very powerful benefit of passive investing is it is a very simple form of investing. You just need to
Okay.
select the right index, and that is
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
The second important aspect is, again, there is a lot of talk about whether active will beat passives or active will generate alpha.
Right.
Again, there's a lot of hue and cry about it. You actually don't know,
True.
whether active will do well or not, and you are taking a call on future.
Right.
While it might have happened in US or some other, by the way, there are many funds, almost 40-50% fund
Mm-hmm.
even in US outperforming the index in certain categories, right? Even
Passive
in
funds, you
India,
mean?
active funds I'm talking
Active
about.
funds. ठीक है.
Active funds outperforming
Okay. Mm-hmm.
indices. So you can actually never take it for granted, and you can't take a 10-year view what will happen. So every
Correct.
asset class, there's a right way whether to go passive or active. So you should not get into whether alpha hoga ya nahi
होगा
hoga.
कि नहीं.
The
Mm-hmm.
important benefit of passive is basically you get market linked returns, and when you
ठीक है.
add passive fund to your portfolio, you are
Mm-hmm.
actually reducing that risk, whether in a short period of time, active strategy, if it underperforms, because active would underperform, because that's where it is called active, right? You take active calls, you don't own some of the stocks in the or some portion of the index
Index. I'm sorry. I
where
think there is.
strategy may not work.
Mm-hmm.
Am I back?
Yes, you're back now.
Right. Okay. So what I
Mm-hmm.
was saying is,
And,
the second important benefit is when you add passive funds to
mm-hmm.
your portfolio, you
Mm-hmm.
reduce some risk of underperformance from active fund. So while
Mm-hmm.
active fund may outperform or whatever they do over the long run, in the
Mm-hmm.
medium term, every active fund will go through patches where it may not do well compared to index.
Mm-hmm.
Some funds would outperform a lot, but your
Mm-hmm.
portfolio will, overall your portfolio will go through those patches. And passive fund actually reduces that risk. In the
Mm-hmm.
short run, which way the market is going, you're generating
Mm-hmm.
market link returns for some portion
Mm-hmm.
of your portfolio,
Mm-hmm.
and that will give you a lot of confidence to stay invested in this kind of fund. I've seen a lot of
Uh-huh.
funds or a lot of investors investing
Mm-hmm.
in picking the best fund within the active
Mm-hmm.
space. Next year
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't do well, they just exit and hop
Leave it.
on to another fund. What
Mm-hmm.
happens in this journey is you cut your compounding journey,
Mm-hmm.
and you keep hopping from one category to another, one fund to another, uh, and you end up actually reducing your return below index or below the average asset class returns. Index funds,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't need to worry whether it is underperforming or outperforming, you
Right.
just stay
Yeah.
invested,
Uh-huh.
stay the course over a longer period of time,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't need to worry about it. So these two very important benefits, simple to choose,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't need to worry, you don't need to review, are the most important benefits of passive. uh,
Perfect. Mm-hmm.
which actually, so today if you ask me, a lot of people do ask me,
Mm-hmm.
my relatives or friends, which fund to invest,
Ah.
and they get in touch with me maybe once or twice in 2-3 years. And even if I say some XYZ fund of my own fund house, it needs to be
Uh-huh.
reviewed. It will go through some patches where there is underperformance, and
Correct.
they will
Huh.
say, "Arey, ye Niranjan ne ye fund bata diya and it's not doing well." So the safest bet for me is I
Uh-huh.
just pick one basic simple index fund,
Mm-hmm.
and ask them कि इसमें SIP कर दो या इसमें invest करो, and just
Correct.
forget it. So for those
Mm-hmm.
kind of investor, passive funds or index funds or ETFs are the best way.
Mm-hmm. Understood. So actually, Ranjan, जो आपने बोला, and I will also switch a little bit to Hindi because a lot of our
Yes,
viewers
sure.
are
Yes.
requesting कि आप हिंदी में बोलिए please. तो
जरूर जरूर.
what I have also heard, आपने भी सुना ही होगा कि जब मार्केट तो बहुत मार्केट के रिटर्न्स हो जाते हैं, लेकिन क्या
Hmm.
आपके इन्वेस्टमेंट रिटर्न्स मार्केट रिटर्न्स जितने हैं, markets sometimes
Exactly.
gain 15, 20, 30%, but when you look at your investment portfolio, इतना returns आता नहीं है, simply for that reason that you just pointed out कि थोड़ा सा भी underperformance होता है, we get scared, there is fear, emotional biases come in and we exit. So from that perspective, what you just pointed out about passive funds, कि it actually helps you take care of your own emotions and perform in line with the market.
with the
So
market,
that
right?
is, and itna, I mean, I don't know if it is safe to say this, but do you think also कि थोड़ा clarity मिलता है, in the sense कि you know कि जितना आप market में बन रहा है उतना ही आपका बनेगा. So आप जब financial planning करते हैं उस हिसाब से भी you are able to figure out कि हाँ इतना बनना चाहिए, कि इतना बन
Right.
सकता है, as opposed to these periods of underperformance. But you know, Niranjan, now maybe that you've explained to us passive investing, something which is sitting in my mind is कि this is all about risk, right? Risk management also to a certain extent. अभी equities
Hmm.
में तो risk होता है, तो it makes sense कि हम equity passives में invest करें. लेकिन debt में तो we've not really heard कि इतना risk होता है, debt is more stable. तो debt में why debt passive investing is something that you would recommend?
Right, right. See, debt, as you rightly said, debt investment काफी कम लोग आजकल करते हैं outside fixed deposit, right?
Correct.
And
बिल्कुल.
in debt, whenever someone invests in fixed income or debt, whatever we call it,
हम्म,
the fixed word in fixed income is taken very seriously, right?
हम्म,
People
हम्म,
need that fixed returns.
जी. हम्म,
Now, why passive investing in fixed income? See, again, the main points of choosing the right fund and all stays there.
right.
But importantly in debt, and uh, बहुत ज़्यादा important है, because what we have seen in last 2-3 years on the
हम्म,
credit side,
हम्म,
passive funds on the debt side gives you a lot of transparency.
okay.
आपको पता है, आप एक अगर पैसिव डेट में इन्वेस्ट कर रहे हो, डेट फंड में इन्वेस्ट
हम्म,
कर रहे हो, कि उसमें
हम्म,
किस क्वालिटी के पेपर लिए जाएंगे,
हम्म,
किस मेच्योरिटी के पेपर लिए जाएंगे, व्हाट इज द क्वालिटी. ऑन अ डेली basis the portfolio is disclosed. There is no say for the fund manager to take risk in these funds. fixed
okay.
income are Fixed income are basically a very simple or safe avenue which people look for their investing. रिस्क
Sure.
आप इक्विटी में ले रहे हो,
हाँ
डेट
जी.
में वो रिस्क कोई लेना नहीं चाहता है. एंड वी हैव सीन
हम्म,
क्रेडिट एपिसोड्स इन recent years.
हम्म.
Outside credit funds also there were a lot of credit events in India.
Right.
जहाँ पे क्रेडिट रिस्क नहीं लेना चाहिए था, वहां पे भी क्रेडिट रिस्क काफी एक्टिव फंड्स में लिया गया, एंड दैट वाज पार्ट
हम्म,
एंड पार्सल. पोर्टफोलियो वाज देयर, बट पीपल नेवर न्यू कि इसमें भी ये रिस्क हो सकता है. सो
correct.
पैसिव इन्वेस्टिंग एक्चुअली गिव्स यू दैट वेरी सिंपल क्लैरिटी कि what could be there in the portfolio, what will not be there in the portfolio.
ठीक है.
Second is definitely cost. When I talk
हम्म,
about cost, and it is like penny wise pound foolish when we talk
हम्म,
about 10 basis point in equity.
हम्म.
10 basis point in equity is nothing. A one day
Right.
return is almost 1%. Even if you compound for over years, it is nothing. And I've
हम्म,
seen people choosing or selecting, shifting funds between equity just for 5 or 10 paisa. While in
हम्म,
debt, it is all the more important. Debt में your returns are somewhere 6 to 8%. Today in a low interest rate environment, you get maybe 5-6% return. उसमें अगर आप 1% या 0.5% expense दे रहे हो, it is huge cost, right? It's
correct.
a huge cost.
हम्म,
uh, Debt cost do matter, and passive, because of its structure, come in a very low cost offering. So these are the benefits of passive. One is transparency, one is quality, so no one can change the quality of the portfolio.
हम्म,
Even when there are opportunities and all, the risk will be intact what you have taken. And third is
हम्म.
cost. So
Correct.
these are some unique benefits which debt passives can give.
ठीक है.
Third is Fourth is debt passives जो इंडिया में स्टार्ट हुआ है
हाँ
with
जी.
the launch of Bharat Bond ETF.
हम्म,
And I spent almost a year, we as a team spent almost a year while researching what kind of structure would be right for Indians to invest. And the
हाँ जी.
target maturity structure, which was launched along with Bharat Bond ETF, if you
हम्म,
see 99, in fact, all debt passives today are on the target maturity structure. ना इस स्ट्रक्चर का एक यूनिक बेनिफिट है दैट इट गिव्स यू एफडी काइंड ऑफ एक्सपीरियंस. You just select the tenure,
Okay.
you
Mm-hmm.
you know what is the yield at which you are getting, and broadly जब अगर आप 3 या 5 साल का टारगेट मेच्योरिटी लेते हो एंड इफ यू स्टे इन्वेस्टेड थ्रू दैट कोर्स, आपके जो रिटर्न्स है ये काफ़ी प्रेडिक्टेबल होते हैं. सो विद इन
Okay.
पैसिव्स और टारगेट मैच्योरिटी स्ट्रक्चर, जो कि इंडिया में मोस्टली डेट पैसिव्स में अभी टारगेट मैच्योरिटी स्ट्रक्चर्स ही आए हैं और
Mm-hmm.
आएंगे भी
Mm-hmm.
बिकॉज ऑफ इट बेनिफिट. दिस बेनिफिट इज नॉट देयर इन मोस्ट एक्टिव म्यूचुअल फंड्स, क्योंकि एक्टिव
Okay.
म्यूचुअल फंड्स में ड्यूरेशन इज मैनेज्ड बाय द फंड मैनेजर, इंटरेस्ट
Sure.
रेट रिस्क
Mm-hmm.
हमेशा रहेगा. इवन इफ यू स्टे
Mm-hmm.
इन्वेस्टेड फॉर मे बी 2-3 years और फ्यू ईयर्स, आपका रिटर्न प्रेडिक्टेबिलिटी नहीं होती है वहाँ पर. whereas in debt
Mm-hmm.
passives which are target maturity structure
Mm-hmm.
based debt passives, there will be some predictability. That is a fourth added advantage if you go to a target maturity based debt passive, and we'll discuss more about it in due course. But these
Okay.
are basically the four benefits of debt passives.
Yes. So actually, Niranjan, thanks. I think yes, and definitely we can have a little bit more discussion on target maturity because uh, थोड़ा it's a different concept. वैसे भी डेट
Right.
कभी confusing हो जाता है because there are multiple options. But before we get into that, I was just I wanted to ask you. So within debt also, and I will correct myself because I initially started कि भाई equity में risk है, debt में तो इतना risk नहीं होता है. But
Mm.
you addressed one of them. You said credit rate risk, credit risk होता है. The other two commonly known ones are interest rate and liquidity. तो
Yes.
are you saying कि जो interest rate risk होता है, वो target maturity fund से it can be managed?
Yes, absolutely. So let me start with basics. Now there
ठीक
are
है.
two kind of risk. Broadly, liquidity is there, but उसको मैं
हम्म,
अभी फिलहाल बाजू में रखूंगा because
जी.
mutual funds today in India mostly invest
हाँ,
in triple A and double A, जहाँ पे liquidity उतना risk नहीं है, and mutual fund takes that
श्योर.
basically risk. Major is interest rate risk. So
जी.
जब आप कोई एक debt fund में invest करते हो एक
हम्म,
bond में of a specific
हम्म,
maturity, आपको एक स्पेसिफिक यील्ड मिलता है. सो लेट्स टेक एग्जांपल, आपने एक 5 साल के बॉन्ड में इन्वेस्ट किया जो कि आपको
हम्म,
6% यील्ड दे रहा है. नाउ
ठीक है.
in 6 months time, interest rates in the economy goes up
ठीक
from
है.
6%. This bond or similar bonds start trading at 6.5%. Because of
श्योर.
this, the price of bond which you are holding goes down.
अच्छा.
सिमिलरली इफ इंटरेस्ट रेट्स गो डाउन, आपका जो बॉन्ड का प्राइस है उसका प्राइस प्राइस ऊपर जाएगा. सो देयर इज अ इनवर्स रिलेशन बिटवीन इंटरेस्ट रेट एंड
रिलेशन.
बॉन्ड प्राइसेस.
श्योर.
द सेकेंड इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग इज जितना आप लंबे समय का बॉन्ड लोगे उतना ज्यादा वोलेटिलिटी होगा. सो इनफैक्ट
बिल्कुल.
if you've seen some GSEC fund in 2008-9 when interest rates went up sharply, they generated almost 10-15% negative return in a span of maybe 4 to 6 months. So it can
ओके.
be that risky. So जितना आप लंबे अवधि का बॉन्ड खरीदोगे और इंटरेस्ट रेट चेंज होगा उतना ज्यादा वोलेटिलिटी होगा. दैट इज इंटरेस्ट रेट रिस्क. द सेकेंड रिस्क इज डिफॉल्ट रिस्क, वी हैव रिसेंटली सीन. डिफॉल्ट या डाउनग्रेड्स रिस्क होते हैं, और जब डिफॉल्ट या डाउनग्रेड होते हैं तब लिक्विडिटी रिस्क बढ़ जाती है.
बढ़
एंड वी हैव
जाती
सीन इन केस ऑफ वन fund in the industry जहाँ पे liquidity crisis काफी हो गया. It was
है.
not a credit crisis, though it was a liquidity crisis. So all these three risks are there. Now, in a target maturity fund, आप क्या करते हो? आप एक simple bond खरीदते हो in the fund, and you stay invested till maturity. So if you
ठीक
are
है.
investing in a 10-year target maturity fund, this fund in turn will invest in 10-year bonds. आज आपने इन्वेस्ट किया से मे बी 2031 मेच्योरिंग पेपर में, पांच
ठीक है.
साल बाद इसकी जो मेच्योरिटी है वो 10 साल कम होगी, 5 साल होगी.
अच्छा मिल जाएगी.
7 साल बाद it will be 3 years maturing. After 10 years, it will have a zero maturity risk. So
ठीक
it
है.
will roll down. It is also called a roll down. Now what
ठीक.
happens, जैसे जैसे आप मेच्योरिटी के क्लोजर आ रहे हो, आपकी मेच्योरिटी ऑफ बॉन्ड या पोर्टफोलियो की मेच्योरिटी कम हो रही है, विच मीन्स आपका इंटरेस्ट रेट रिस्क कम होते जा रहा
कब
है.
हो रहा है?
एंड इफ यू आर होल्डिंग दिस टिल मेच्योरिटी, जिस रेट पे आपने इन्वेस्ट किया आपका रिटर्न उसके आसपास होगा. इट सिंपली वर्क्स लाइक अ बॉन्ड स्ट्रक्चर. आपने कोई
हम्म,
एनसीडीज या बॉन्ड में इन्वेस्ट किया 10 साल के लिए, जब
हम्म,
मैच्योरिटी होगा एवरी ईयर यू गेट दैट इंटरेस्ट, एंड मैच्योरिटी में आपको आपका प्रिंसिपल मिल जाता है. सो दिस इज बेसिकली द ब्यूटी ऑफ टारगेट मैच्योरिटी. आपका इंटरेस्ट रेट रिस्क ऑलमोस्ट नलीफाई होता है. यस, लेकिन
हम्म,
आप इन बिटवीन आप देखोगे तो यहाँ पे भी आपकी एनएवी फ्लक्चुएट होगी, देयर विल बी
fluctuate
इंटरेस्ट
rate.
रेट. बट
हम्म,
यहाँ पे जरूरत है कि आप निवेश करें और एंड ऑफ द टेन्योर तक, मेच्योरिटी तक उसको
good.
होल्ड करते रहे, एज
हम्म,
अपोज अदर डेट म्यूचुअल फंड्स में जहाँ पे ये टारगेट मेच्योरिटी स्ट्रक्चर्स नहीं होते हैं. व्हाट
हम्म,
हैपेंस इवन आफ्टर 10 year, the maturity of the fund, say let's take example of short term fund. Short
हम्म,
term fund generally will have maturity range between 2 to 3 years.
हम्म,
आज भी 2 to 3 years रहेगी, 3 साल के बाद भी उसी रेंज में रहेगी, और 10 साल के
correct.
बाद भी उसी रेंज में रहेगी. सो इफ यू आर इन्वेस्टिंग इन अ शॉर्ट टर्म kind of fund, the duration risk will always be there. आप जिस
Correct.
साल उसमें से पैसे निकाल रहे हो और उस साल अगर इंटरेस्ट रेट काफी तेजी से ऊपर गए, रिटर्न आपके वहां पर कम हो सकते हैं. So the
Okay.
best way for a lot of investors in India is because Indian investors are used to FD kind of experience. It is very simple for them. You just go to bank. अगर आपको 3 साल का पैसा डालना है, आप 3 साल का एफडी का रेट ले, एफडी में डाल दे, 3 साल बाद आपका पैसा वापस आ जाएगा. दिस टारगेट मेच्योरिटी गिव्स यू अ सिमिलर
Similar
एक्सपीरियंस.
experience.
There is a entire yield curve, there is a maturity bucket available. Like at Edelweiss we have target maturity fund starting from
Mhm.
2023 to
Okay.
25, 27, 30, 31, and recently launched 32. अगर आपको
Mhm.
5 साल का इन्वेस्टमेंट करना है, you can simply select 2026 maturity target maturity fund, index fund, invest
Mhm.
करें. Whenever maturity happens, you can take your proceeds and go back home. It's very simple. You don't need to worry about risk.
So Niranjan, can I ask you a small question here? तो ज-
Yes.
जब मैं ये 5 साल के बॉन्ड में और फंड में इन्वेस्ट करूंगी, सो एट द टाइम ऑफ इन्वेस्टमेंट विल आई हैव एन आइडिया कि इस पे क्या इंटरेस्ट रेट मिल सकता है? क्या लाइक इन एफडी हमको पता होता है, राइट? तो इसमें
Right.
भी डू
Right.
वी हैव एन इंडिकेटिव आइडिया?
So like mutual funds में returns guaranteed नहीं होते हैं. However,
करेक्ट.
in this structure you can at least get a indication कि returns क्या हो सकता है, because
क्या?
it's a target maturity fund, and
हम्म,
say the Bharat Bond 2032 fund which we
हम्म,
launched recently, the
हम्म,
index yield was somewhere around 6.8%.
ओके.
अगर आज कोई इन्वेस्ट कर रहा है तो उसको
हम्म,
पता है कि ये पोर्टफोलियो जो बनेगा भारत बॉन्ड
हम्म,
का, इसका यील्ड
हम्म,
इसके आसपास होगा. और अगर मैं 10 साल तक इसको होल्ड करूं माइनस एक्सपेंसेस, इसके
हम्म,
आसपास रिटर्न बनने की अ, संभावना है. बिकॉज
संभावना
यहाँ
है.
पे दूसरा कोई रिस्क नहीं है, अनलेस एंड अनटिल द बॉन्ड डिफॉल्ट्स एंड ऑल,
हम्म,
which I think so is very almost negligible risk, because these are
हम्म,
all PSU bonds and all. उसके
हम्म,
अलावा there is no other risk in this fund. You
हम्म,
just stay invested till maturity. इसके आसपास आपका रिटर्न हो सकता है, and that is the most powerful uh, you know uh, advantage of target
हम्म,
maturity funds, because
हम्म,
the typical question even in equity today, people
हम्म,
ask कि कितना मिलेगा, right?
करेक्ट.
And we don't have answers. What we have answers to these kind of question is पिछले 10 साल में 15% मिला है तो आगे भी मिल जाएगा, which is very vague, which has no logic behind it. But when
करेक्ट.
it comes to target maturity funds, we can at least give some indication that this is the yield at which you are entering. uh, Minus tracking error and some expense, the returns could be around this range.
Perfect. Superb. Actually, Niranjan, lots of our viewers was also sending in us questions, while not specifically related to debt investments, but I will, in any case, there's a Mr. Fabian D'Souza who's asking us, he is new to investing, and somebody
Mhm.
who's new to investing, should the person invest in debt products or equity products? Hmm.
Right. So, your being new to investing has nothing to do with whether you select equity or debt. It is more
Mhm.
to do with what is the objective of investing. अगर
Okay.
आपको wealth creation करना है
Mhm.
and you have a long term view, definitely you can start with very simple index funds, equity index funds like
Mhm.
Nifty large and mid cap, Nifty 50 index funds.
Mhm.
Do SIP or lump sum and stay invested for longer term. अगर
Mhm.
आपका ऑब्जेक्टिव है दैट यू वांट टू सेव, यू वांट टू गेट मे बी एफडी काइंड ऑफ रिटर्न्स, but
Mhm.
in a much tax efficient way, then maybe
Mhm.
target maturity funds or even low duration funds are right for you. and you can go for
Mhm.
them. So आपका
Mhm.
जो return objective क्या है and
Mhm.
time horizon is very
Right.
important
Mhm.
to decide whether you want to go for equity or debt. uh,
Perfect.
अगर आप
Mhm.
कंफ्यूज हो, the best way
Mhm.
is to go with hybrid, because
Mhm.
hybrid
Mhm.
funds में debt भी होता है, equity होता है. And
Correct.
Deepika, you would know my first recommendation would be funds like balanced advantage funds.
Balance advantage. Yes, yes. I will. I know, and I will also 100% endorse it
Yeah,
because we've had conversations on this before and with Radhika as well in the past, and she
right,
makes a very compelling argument. And I think I can personally say my experience has been very positive in balance advantage funds.
right,
But हाँ, जैसे आपने बोला, and it will also go back to our initial thought process कि सिर्फ एक asset class क्यों रखो आप. हर asset class का कुछ benefit होता है. तो आप
yes,
मल्टीपल एसेट क्लास में द प्रीडोमिनेंट वंस बीइंग डेट इन इक्विटी दोनों में इन्वेस्ट करिए बेस्ड ऑन लाइक यू सेड योर
right.
रिटर्न रिक्वायरमेंट्स एंड इन्वेस्टमेंट टाइम होराइजन. तो great, he's also saying thank you. And then we also have a Mr. Vivek Chauhan who has asked us कि sir bond में कोई small investor invest कर सकते हैं. I think he probably means direct bond investing. Is that possible for small investors to directly
See,
invest in
direct
bond?
bond, now RBI has started, a retail direct GSEC
Mhm.
platform and all. वहाँ पे आप कर सकते हो.
Mhm.
Otherwise, usually bonds में direct invest करना is very inefficient. One is
Mhm.
the ticket size is very large. Most
Mhm.
corporate bonds are in multiples of 10 lakhs or even more. सेकेंड इज
Mhm.
बॉन्ड मार्केट में लिक्विडिटी इज वेरी लो. जैसे आप इक्विटी में जाके स्क्रीन बेस्ड सिंपल ऑर्डर डालकर कोई इक्विटी खरीद सकते हो, बॉन्ड
Mhm.
मार्केट इज वेरी डिफिकल्ट.
Mhm.
You don't get the right price, the tracking is not very efficiently, plus
Mhm.
the ticket sizes are very large. And that is the reason, a fund like target maturity fund is very
Mhm.
simple, because it is just a structure which helps you hold the underlying bonds, and you can start investing with mutual fund in these kind of funds with as low as maybe 5,000 rupees. So that would be a more efficient structure. Plus taxation is also important in investing directly in
Mhm.
bonds. The interest which you earn is taxed at the marginal rate. So if you're at a
Mhm.
20 or 30% tax bracket, you end up paying almost 20-30% of your gains in taxes. Whereas
Right.
in a mutual fund structure, you get an indexation benefit.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
because it's an accrual based investing, after 3 years you pay only 20%
Good.
index post indexation, which
Mhm.
ends up to being very low on the overall return. So they are
Good.
much more tax efficient structure also. So
Mhm.
I would rather suggest to hold uh, bonds through a mutual fund structure rather going it directly.
Perfect. That makes absolute sense. I think all the benefits of mutual fund investing plus the
Yes,
benefits of investing in fixed income securities through mutual fund, दोनों ही
absolutely.
आपको approve होंगे. So that's great. So Niranjan, I think for all of our viewers actually, can we also little bit sum up the whole what kind of investors would you recommend should invest in debt passives? And
Right.
if at all, you can give us some indication that for an average investor, what kind of allocations out of the total portfolio should go to specifically debt passives? It would be
Right.
great.
Right. See, what kind of investors? As I mentioned, passive investing is for an investor who doesn't want to spend too much time in what to select, which, how to review, and all. Passive investing for is basically for such kind of investor. Debt passives is basically for all investors out there who wants to keep their portfolio very very simple,
Mhm,
wants to go for quality, wants to go for I would say hassle free debt investments.
mhm,
And when I'm talking about debt passives today, it is largely in context of target maturity funds, because in India, on the debt passive side, we have only target maturity funds. While there are very different structures globally, here
mhm,
I'm talking about target maturity funds. These are very, very simple funds. You can substitute a large portion of your, traditional investment revenues with target maturity funds. So, an investor who has a large chunk of fixed income investing through maybe
mhm,
traditional investments like FD
mhm,
or other small saving schemes,
mhm,
would definitely look at debt passives, specifically
mhm,
target maturity funds. And
mhm,
whenever interest rates are, on a higher side, he
mhm,
should take benefits of these target maturity fund by locking in his money for longer period of time at a good reasonable rate. I'll just give you an example. Today, a lot of FD investors are doing FDs at maybe 4.5-5% interest rate, right?
Correct.
At the same time, a 10-year target maturity today is offering a gross return of almost 6.8 to 7% in that range,
Mm-hmm.
because in the yield curve is pretty steep, right? Now, this 200 basis point return, a lot of people are leaving behind because they're not coming to debt passives, or they are not aware about it. You
Correct.
just simply uh, take that 10-year call, stay invested, and just forget about everything. It beats inflation. India inflation is around 5% on a long
Mm-hmm.
term average, could be lower as well. It
Mm-hmm.
gives you a good real return. So for these kind of investor, it's the right choice in my view.
Mm-hmm.
How to go about it? Just simple, select your tenure, select which tenure you want, and that's the most important thing, because if you're investing for 2-3 years, don't go for a
Mm-hmm.
10-year target maturity
Correct.
fund or a duration fund.
Mm-hmm.
Match
Mm-hmm.
your maturity with the maturity of match your investment horizon with the maturity of these funds, and I think so
Sure.
they should be very fine for your overall portfolio allocation.
Perfect. Perfect, Niranjan. I think जो आपने end में बोला, right, that comparison between what the FD returns are and what target maturity on an average 6.5% जो आपने बोला, I think that is the reason why we needed to have this conversation, right? क्योंकि
Yeah.
बहुत लोगों को पता नहीं है कि ये 200 basis points, 2% increment they can gain by investing in FD like instruments which are offered by mutual funds. So I hope all our listeners have some good takeaways and are maybe better positioned to understand the benefits. I definitely am. Thank you so much for being here today, for sharing these insights, and also addressing some of the queries that our listeners brought up.
Okay, thank you so much, Deepika. Glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you, listeners, for viewers actually for tuning in today. Much appreciated, and we will see you next week. Next week's Fund Manager Fridays. Thank you.
Thank you.